Okay, let's take a look at another dash camera. Today it's the Aukey DR01. I bought this all the way back in January 18, but didn't end up putting it in a car until July 18, and I've been using it in that car ever since. So I've got quite a good opinion now of how this operates, what it does well, what it doesn't do quite as well, and whether there's any issues with it whatsoever. So let's get it out of the box and have a good look at it. So this was filmed all the way back in July. You can see there, it's a traditional layout. We've got a small screen, 4 buttons below there. And then to the left of it, we've got an LED and a reset button. I haven't had to press the reset button. It's not locked up on me, so that's good news. All the inputs and outputs are along the top. We've got the usual slot for a micro SD card on there, so I'll just pop one in. And then on the right hand side of there, there's an AV output, an analog AV output. I haven't tested that during this video. USB for the data transfer and power. And then to the left of there, there's an input for an external GPS antenna. So while the camera supports GPS, if you want to activate that functionality, you'll have to buy this optional extra. We've got some clips for attaching the cable around your car, and we've got 2 separate mounts. One that's adhesive, one that's a suction cup. They're both nice and compact though. Now, one thing that people ask me every now and then is what would be a good camera to use for transporting between different vehicles. I've heard from people who drive a van, say for work, and it's a different van every day, and they want something that uses a suction cup. Well, this would be a suitable one for that purpose, and then you could put perhaps the adhesive one in your car at home if you wanted. We've got 2 separate adhesive mounts in here. Notice the grey backing on those, which shows up a bit more through a car windscreen than you'd like. And then we've got a 24-month product warranty on here, and the manual. The manual's very simple. It's a simple camera. It doesn't have a lot of functionality, so they can just describe how it works over the course of about 3 pages, I think, in here, and some of that's taken up with other stuff as well. So yeah, just simple camera. Plug it in, it records. Unplug it, it stops recording. There's no Wi-Fi, there's none of that business. We've got a USB lead with a right angle plug on here, which keeps it nice and neat at the top of the windscreen. And thoughtfully, they provided a 2 output USB adapter, so you can charge something else while this is occupying your 12-volt power supply. Now, when you first switch it on, it will ask you to set the language, set the date, set the time, and then it'll just work. But at that point, I'd also format the micro SD card just to be on the safe side. And that's it. That's all most people would need to do. Put that in your windscreen in your car. That's it. Leave it there. Don't worry about it. But we'll go through a couple of the other settings here. First off, resolution. 1080p 30, 720p 60, 720p 30, and a couple that nobody ever uses. I use 1080p 30 just by preference. Operating temperature, because this uses a supercapacitor rather than a battery, there's no battery to swell up in extreme heat, and therefore this is a good reliable camera across a good broad temperature range. And the micro SD card will support up to 128 gigabytes in this, which is what I put in my camera. According to the instructions, a 128GB micro SD card will hold approximately 20 hours of video, which is a good thing, because imagine something happened a couple of weeks ago that you didn't know about, but then somebody informs your insurance company, they send a letter in the post to you, did this happen 2 weeks ago in this car park? You can have a look back on your video and hopefully you've got 20 hours worth of video. It would still have that incident or non-incident on there. Right, now once it's booted up, you can see it will start recording. We've got the indicator flashing at the top, that red dot, and also on the side we've got the LED flashing as well. I suppose you could cover that with a piece of tape if it annoyed you, but in my car, of course, it's facing the passenger side. These buttons below here obviously do whatever it says along the bottom there, but they have additional functions. For example, if I hold down the play one, you can see the microphone gets a line through it, so that turns the mic on and off by holding it down. And there's another sort of secret command here on the settings button. If you hold that one down, it takes a photo. I don't know why you'd really want to do that, but it's just a still, a 1080p video still, really. The proper functions of these buttons, well, the right hand one turns the screen off, as you can see there. The screen will automatically switch off as well, but that just does it manually. The left hand one, of course, is the emergency button. Press that, it will lock the current video file being recorded, and therefore when the memory card is recycled, written over, that file will not get deleted. Now, if we have a look at the micro SD card here, you can see the layout. We've got the 2 folders, one with the photos in and then the other one with all the videos, and the MOV file format H.264 encoding. You can see we've got the year, the month, the date, the time, and then there's an index number next to them, so it's easy to find the particular file that you're looking for. Scrolling to the bottom of the movie folder reveals another folder. That's where the emergency files are stored. You can see the oldest one of these dates back to the 3rd of August at the top there, whereas the other video files dated back to October because, of course, they've been written over. These are stored in here and will not be written over unless I delete them manually or format the card. I think you can store as many of those as you want in there, of course, until your card gets full up at least. Now, I'll just go through these pages of settings. There are 5 pages, 4 items on each page, so nice and simple. Good clear screen on this one as well. Very easy to operate. The buttons below are obvious as to what they do. Most people wouldn't need to mess around with any of these settings after the initial setup, and I'd say it's a good simple camera, the kind of dash camera that I would have given to my father if he was still driving. Because it's the kind of thing you just pop in your windscreen and just leave there and don't worry about. You can change the format of the date, by the way, if you want it day, month, year, or month, day, year, you know, that kind of thing. And also whether you want the date stamp and timestamp on top of the video, whether you want to record audio as a default, whether you want the beep in these menus on as a default, mess around with the exposure, the frequency, of course, you set that to the frequency of the electricity in your area, whether it's 50 Hertz or 60 Hertz to stop lights flickering on things like signs on shops and stuff. Speed unit, now that's only relevant of course if you plug that GPS antenna in the top, which I haven't got and I don't intend to get. I'm not that into having GPS on my cameras. I know some people like to have it. Accelerometer, the shock sensor, I always set it to a low sensitivity and it hasn't given me any false readings in my car. It hasn't locked any files, which is what it would do if it noticed a bump, and I haven't had any of those happening over potholes. That's good. TV mode for that output on the top, which I haven't tested out. I think that would just be for playback of the video. The languages, I'll just quickly scroll through these. It's the standard set that you get on any dash cam. And then the screensaver, that's how long it takes to blank the screen, 1 minute, 3 minutes, or stay on all the time. I have it blank off as quickly as possible, so that's 1 minute. Motion detection, if your camera is powered continuously, then you'll need to use motion detection to enable the auto start and stop of the video recording, otherwise it'll just record all the time. It's sat in your garage or outside your house or whatever. And time-lapse record, well that does, I believe, 1 frame every second, which is just all the time. It's not like a parking mode or anything like that. So not something that I would use. You just end up with really fast video, which I suppose if you're doing some sort of travel log driving across a country, you could use it for that, but it wouldn't be any use for accident footage. It would probably miss what had actually happened if it's just 1 frame every second. Next to the bottom, that's the format menu we used before. The format warning is something that will remind you to format the card at whatever interval you choose. Always a good idea to format your card every now and then, just to avoid any bad clusters or something. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, moving on. Default changes everything back to default, and that's the firmware that's in my camera at the moment. I believe there are no new firmwares for this. I've checked on the website. There just seems to be the one there. It doesn't mention that there's any updates available. So when it comes back to playing the video, of course, you can take the micro SD card out. You can plug the camera into a computer and drag the files off that way, or you can play them back on the screen on the camera itself, which is always a useful thing to do. If you were at a location and a policeman says, well, what happened in front of you? You say, oh, hold on, I'll show you the video on this camera, which is something that these Wi-Fi cameras, after you have to connect up with your phone and stuff, it's a big pain in the neck. This doesn't have Wi-Fi. You just play it back on the screen here. You can unlock the files. If it's one of these locked ones, as this is, you can see the lock indicator at the top right there, and it was also on the icon. You can fast forward, you can rewind, you can pause, you can delete, you can go back to the menu and choose another one. You can see along the top there it shows the date and time for that particular file as well. So yeah, nice and simple. Again, anyone could use this. I say anyone, I should hope anyone could use it, because you can't really get it much simpler than this. So I've had this camera in the car for quite a few months now, and during that time I had a 128GB micro SD card in there. And I just let it re-record over and over again, except if something slightly unusual happened, I then pressed the emergency button, so I'd have a compilation of clips that I could show you in this video. So let's start off with the ones where people didn't give way at a giveaway. So the chap coming on the left now just decides to pull onto the roundabout when I'm already on the roundabout, and then drive across the centre of it. Happens a lot, that. This one, 60-mile-an-hour road. I was going quite slow at this point, but this chap here sees me and then just decides, right, that's the time I'm going to pull out, and pulls out in front of the car. Bit of a risk, that. Good job I wasn't going any faster. This chap had done a U-turn, decides to just pull into the road with no indicators straight in front of the car. Now this one's a bit of a comedy of errors. Look, a couple of lanes down and you'll see a blue Nissan Juke emerge from the left and nearly pull into that car that's going down the road. Of course, the Nissan Juke is at a give way. Now at this point I stop the car because I think, well, you're already out, you might as well continue, and then it nearly pulls into the car going in the other direction, and then just takes this corner at such a wide angle. And then finally I think, well, I'll go, and then somebody tries it again in that car. I mean, these aren't low down cars. They could have seen over the top of the car that was next to them as well, so there's just poor observation. Now, wide angle lenses are great for capturing a lot of the stuff that's going on to either side of the car, but they also have the unfortunate side effect of making everything look further away. So this chap pulling in front of the car now is doing it far too close, but on the video it doesn't look like such a big deal. Now this one, nothing to do with people pulling in front, just a chap deciding to make up his own lane going up this hill. There's a queue of traffic going up the hill, which there always is on this one, and he just decides, I'm going to make up a third lane and go past everyone for no reason at all. Just an absolute barn pot. Now the next clip I just want to show you is something that I luckily avoided, and it's the kind of thing that if you'd had two dash cameras in the car it would have been better, one facing towards the rear, but this car doesn't really accommodate one of those. So I'm going past this horse box, which is doing about 55 on the motorway. Now I would have pulled in at this point, but I looked in my left hand mirror and I could see some guy getting on the motorway at what looked like a massive speed, and I thought, well, if I pull in there it's just going to be straight into the back of my car. And here he is in a second. He'll shoot past on the left at about 100 miles an hour, undertaking everyone. Just complete nutter. Now, talk about ridiculous risk takers. You'll see one in this next video. It's not the chap going around the HGV at the moment, or even the chap following him. They've got plenty of forward visibility. It's the next guy. It's, guess who, Audi guy, yes. Overtakes me at about 90 miles an hour. This is in a 60 zone. Then overtakes the HGV as well, but then panics because he realises that he's run out of road. At this point, there's a sharp left turn. Throws his brake lights on because he's going, oh God, I've got it wrong. Pulls in front of the HGV, and then he has to do this sharp left turn up Sutton Bank, which is where we are at the moment. Funny thing is, going up there, he immediately went round the corner, the other two cars were behind another HGV, and we all went up the hill at about 15 miles an hour. So he risked his life and those of anyone travelling in the other direction for absolutely nothing. Dash cameras aren't all about capturing idiots and accidents though. Sometimes you get nice things on there that you want to share with people, like this time. There was a Morgan three-wheeler at the front. I think that's a Bentley convertible. And then following there, a couple more convertibles, because it must have been some kind of club on their day out. Is that a Aston Martin? And then a Porsche? And then a bit of a gap, and then we get a Jaguar convertible as well. It looked like one of those Top Gear challenges going past. Now here's an unusual thing. I've seen some weird stuff on the roads, but I'd put this quite up at the higher end of the list. This is a Volkswagen Beetle with a giant cow sculpture on the top. And it isn't just transporting it, it's part of the car. You can see on the back there they've got a fake methane tank, hashtag cow car at the bottom right. And if we zoom in on the text as we go past it, we can read a bit more information. Cows emit 16% of global greenhouse gases. This is more than all the cars and trucks and plants and ships, etc. Yeah, so an anti-cow car, not the kind of thing you see every day. Now, the reason I've been using this particular camera isn't because I was unhappy with any of the other cameras I've had before. It's just that I was going to pick up a new car, and it was quite some distance away, and I had to go there by train. And then I thought, well, I'll be driving all the way home in this unfamiliar car, and I'd really like to have a dash camera in it. So I looked around the house and saw this one that I'd bought that had a suction cup. I thought, well, that's ideal because I can just go and put that in the car at the garage and then drive home with it, and I won't be concerned about if anything happens on the way home, because that's when something would happen, of course. The one time you don't have a camera in the car is when something would happen. So yeah, that's why I've been using this one. But ever since I put it in there, I've been happy with it, and I didn't bother taking it out, even though it's a very simple model with no Wi-Fi, no GPS without that optional extra, no parking mode or any of that kind of business. But let's move on and cover off a few different things that people tend to ask about, such as what happens when you join two video files together. In this case, I'm recording 3-minute files. If I stitch two 3-minute files together, there's a little bit of an overlap. You'll see it here. There you go, that jump back. It's approximately 2 seconds, I think. And it's 2 seconds from the end of the previous file on the next file. So what that means is you won't lose any footage at all, but if you stitch two files together, you get a slight jump. I'm showing you some footage from various different lighting conditions here. So this is town, I suppose, with all the shop lights and the overhead lights, and then we're going down a road with no lighting other than from my car and the car headlights coming in the opposite direction. And then this one is a lane with no lights other than my full beam. And then to finish off the nighttime footage, here's the motorway with two different kinds of lighting. We've got the lights down the middle here, I think those are sodium lights, and then we've got these ones at either edge. So whether it's at night time or at daytime or even a situation like this where the light is continuously varying, the camera seems to perform well. However, there is one situation that does seem to trip it up a little bit. It hasn't happened more than a couple of times, but I'll just show you what I mean. Yeah, this low winter sun when you're driving straight at it. I mean, this is really blindingly glary, but the camera, as you can see, has made everything a little bit too dark as a result. Turn the corner, it's a different story entirely. Now, again, it happened on the same journey a little bit further on. You can see here, as I'm heading towards the sun, it gets quite dark there. You can't really make out an awful lot, such as the car in front or whether someone was coming in the other direction. But again, as soon as you get that sun straight out of the direct on view, it copes fine. So it doesn't happen often and for long, but it can happen. However, if you needed to use some of this dark footage as evidence, it is possible to put the video file into an editing package and brighten it up. And as you can see, I've done that on the right hand side here, and as a result you're able to make out the colour of the parked cars that you can't do on the original file.
.com/MacBreak and use the code MacBreak. So 10% for subscribing, 10% because you're listening to this show is 20% off. Now it's really affordable.
Now, I was going to recommend this camera with a couple of reservations, but there's one thing that's really put me off, and it's only become apparent while I was editing it. You notice that black frame there? You won't have seen that earlier on because I've had to cut it out of the video. It happens when you press the emergency button. I've pressed it there for the scene that just happened. So it happens before and after you press the emergency button, but within the same clip. For example, I see a Ferrari there. I think I'll press the button here, and we get that black section. Now, it doesn't always happen like that. You'll see in this clip that we used earlier on, there's a bit of video interference there, and it's only later the chap goes past me and I press the button somewhere up here, and it doesn't go blank at that point. And on this scene, I haven't pressed the button at all for an emergency, but there's still some video corruption you'll see just around there. Now, that corruption, you think that's not such a big deal, it's just a frame here or there. The problem is, when I put it into this video and then tried to render it out as a full video from iMovie, iMovie refused to render it because the video files were corrupted. So I'd made a version of this video where I'd done all the voiceover and said, yeah, it's okay as a camera, there's a couple of little video glitches, no problem with that, it's nothing to really concern yourself about, I'm going to leave the camera in my car, it's fine for me. But then I tried to render the video out and it crashed out on me, and I thought, hold on a minute, well, it's not much use having a camera that records video that you can't use. So then I've ended up completely changing my opinion. So I'd done these pros and cons, I'd written these up already. I said it was a simple camera to use, the kind that you could give to any relative, nice and small, keeps out of the way at the top of the windscreen. You can move it from one vehicle to another because it's got a suction cup mount. The fact it's got a capacitor means that we don't have any issues with the battery overheating or expanding. Therefore, it's been reliable for me. It hasn't crashed at all, and it takes 128GB cards, which is something that I appreciate. But then I went into the cons and said, well, it's a bit slow to boot. That's something I hadn't really mentioned earlier on, but it takes about 10 seconds. In my car, not a big deal, because as soon as I press the unlock on the remote key fob, the lighter socket powers up, and therefore the camera's already recording by the time I start the engine. But, you know, for some people it might be an issue. I mentioned the glare issue with the exposure. If you've got the sun coming towards you, it can get a bit dark. And in passing, I mentioned the emergency video glitch, thinking that it wasn't such a big deal. But now I've changed my mind on that. I think that's a big deal, and they need to sort the firmware out on this camera to get around that. So this bit at the end where I was going to say, well, if you want one, you can go and get it on Amazon. There's links in the video description. I know no one's going to click on those now. But I suppose I've gone through all this for nothing. But at least you now know what the DR01 is like from Aukey. It does have a couple of little issues. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.